Hello, my friends. This is episode 33. It's been a long journey. I thank you for those who come with me on my journey. As I've told you, my journey through life to the point of where I am now. But it's time to bring the journey of my journey to an end. So we're going to just start wrapping up the last couple stories here, and we'll be done. Madness has always dogged my steps. I've joked many times throughout my life that eventually I'm going to end up in a mental hospital. How prophetic. I left off last time hinting at the consequences of Denver's indiscretions making a reappearance. But first, I need to tell about the job I had after UPS. So there was a job in between unemployment and UPS. A friend from my church, he got me a job where he worked. It was another factory / machine shop kind of a thing, and I didn't really want to return to the factory setting because I said this before, when we moved to Ohio, my first job was working at this notoriously, insanely hard factory, the hardest job I've ever had. But I really liked the idea of working with a friend from church, so I decided to take it. This friend, he was just so instrumental and incredibly helpful in me dealing with the whole Stephanie separation, the whole debacle, because he had a very similar situation happen to him, and God saw him through it. And sometimes God allows his own to go through horrible trials so that they can be a help and a blessing to somebody else in similar circumstances. That's 2 Corinthians 1:4, and this dear friend of mine, he lived out that verse beautifully. Also at this time, I decided I'm going to go back and start working out again. Kind of missed it a little bit. And I was also motivated by the fact that the guy Stephanie was into was a total gym rat, a walking mountain of muscle. So I figured if I start putting on more muscle, it would help convince Stephanie to come back home because she was still in New York at this point. I joined a popular gym franchise, and I turned into one of those annoying gym rats myself. You know the kind, always drinking whey protein shakes and eating 15 different meals throughout the day full of protein because you got to keep that muscle on. As annoying as it was, I was determined to save my marriage. The thing is, it also fed my obsession and addiction of pushing myself past my limits. I've spoken of this many times throughout these stories to the point that it's just so played. I love challenging myself, and I challenged myself quite a bit at this gym, always working out. So one particular afternoon at the gym, probably at hour 2 of being at the gym, I heard a commercial on the radio. It's always playing loud, motivating music. You know what I'm talking about. It was an ad for an IT tech type college. It wasn't ITT tech. It was his competitor. I was listening to this commercial. I got thinking about it. And it was saying that it's only a 6-month course. And at the end of it, you had 4 certifications, which, as the sales pitch went, would lead you to the exciting, great, high-paying job in the IT world. Because of my injury at UPS, which had convinced me that I was sick of manual labor, and because I was fairly okay with computers in general, I figured this would be a perfect career path for me to take. I would finally have a stable job, which would then give Stephanie the security I was forever not providing her, which was one of her biggest complaints. So I also convinced myself that maybe this was God's plan, because I never would have heard this commercial if I wasn't always working out. And I wouldn't be working out if I wasn't trying to save my marriage. This had, capital HAD, this had to be God. I applied to this school, and shocker of shockers, they accepted me. Of course they would. I was the idiot willing to pay them $27,000 for 4 certifications that would be obsolete in a year's time. No degree, certifications. That's what I was giving $27,000 for. Spoiler alert, this quote-unquote school, it was basically a scam, and it has since gone bankrupt and has roughly, 46 bajillion lawsuits against it. I am still paying this loan back. I'll probably be paying on this loan long after I'm dead. But it didn't matter because at that time, I convinced myself this was my path, so I poured myself into it, mind, body, and soul. I poured more into this than I ever did at college. It was a great motivator because it helped me endure working at this factory that I didn't want to do anymore anyway. Because, as I said, I was sick of manual labor and, it wasn't really that hard of a job, but it's just, I was tired of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I was constantly studying for these certifications. And as I'm doing this, I quickly discovered that being able to get around a computer is one thing. Understanding how to manipulate stuff in the background is an entirely different animal. It's some insanely hard stuff that my mind, it cannot comprehend. I only ended up getting 2 certifications. So $27,000, 2 certifications. Whoop-de-doo. But in a positive sense, those 2 certifications did get me out of that machine shop, so that was a good thing. I began doing little contract work for various basic IT related jobs for hospitals and businesses. It was like all temp work. And there were also fluff jobs. Unbox a new computer, plug it in. Whoa, slow down. Let me write these steps down. And then, connect it to the Wi-Fi in the printer. Rinse and repeat. Mind-numbingly repetitive and boring. I don't do well with repetitive, boring stuff because I get bored very quickly. But I got a really sweet contract working for NASA, the NASA. I got excited for this one because it was a bit more challenging and I was required to get security clearance, which felt super cool to me, like I was James Bond or something. During this whole process here with NASA and doing the different contract, side jobs, whatever, I was trying my best to convince Stephanie that I was now worth coming home to, that she could come back because I had a fairly good job and I was on a great career path, that I was going to finally give her the security she was always trying to get. And I was especially going to get her the security because now I'm going to be working for NASA. Well, I ended up working exactly 1 day for NASA because my background check for security clearance, it informed them that I still have those 2 felony warrants on my record that I talked about a few stories back. Apparently, my pastor's letter of recommendation to the Denver DA didn't do diddly squat in expunging my record. Obviously, that concluded my time of setting up scientists' computers. This latest gut punch, not to mention the return anxiety of going to jail, took all the wind out of my sails. I descended into the most unbelievably deep pit of despair. Even when I wasn't sleeping away the days, I was focused heavily on trying to get those warrants dealt with once and for all. I talked to my screenwriting buddy / lawyer who contacted the DA the last time and convinced him, can you please contact them again to see what's the deal, man? What's going on? The DA told him that he would only expunge them if I could get several letters of recommendation from upstanding people testifying to my new life of crime-free living. Well, I got 5 such letters. And praise the Lord, those letters, they did earn me official documentation that, yes, I am no longer a wanted man. That was a good moment because let me tell you right now, I was sick of always looking over my shoulder. Looking over my shoulder as I'm driving just past some hidden spot where a cop might be waiting, doing traffic, might pull me over for speeding and finding out that I have a warrant out for my arrest. That's how I lived anytime I drove. It was just terrible. So it goes without saying, the relief was glorious. And I took those official documents to NASA, hoping to get my job back. No dice, because they already filled the position. I gave up. Said, I'm done. I'm checking out. I gave up on life completely. I stopped applying for IT contract jobs, which was no real loss because I hate IT anyway. I'm pretty sure that apart from my terrible Denver choices, my choosing to go to this school was the worst decision I've ever made. God never wanted me to go there, but I was playing all these mental games, convincing myself that no matter the cost, no matter the $27,000 cost, I had to do whatever it took to save my marriage. I was functioning in a constant state of amped up, desperate paranoia. I wasn't thinking straight. My abandonment issues were running the show, not God. Besides, my career choices weren't the main issue with my marriage. The main issue was Stephanie and I were never supposed to get married to begin with. So maybe Stephanie and I getting married is the second worst decision after Denver and this stupid school number 3. They're interchangeable. Who knows? But like I said in a previous story, because I had manipulated the whole marrying Stephanie situation, and I did this because I was sick of waiting for God to bring me a wife. I mean, yeah, at that point, I was no longer an out-of-control drug addict, but I was still living a rebellious life. I also said in the last story that I had finally started dealing with my mental health. But now, because I am on unemployment, I have no insurance, I could no longer afford my antidepressants. I took matters in my own hands. I also said this in the last story, that I just returned to those over-the-counter medications, those over-the-counter meds with a terrible hangover. I was now popping an absurd amount of these pills on a regular basis, a couple, 2-3 times a week. They pretty much became my surrogate antidepressants. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the next part of my life, the next part of the story, because it's horrible. The shame and embarrassment I brought on myself and my friends and family, it's still tough to think about. Anyway, here's what I'm going to tell. One day, I returned back to my apartment. I'm unemployed. I'm just wasting the day, doing anything to kill the time. I returned to the apartment that Stephanie and I had when we first moved out to Ohio. I found a bunch of teens milling around on the front lawn. I've never seen them before. So I said, "What's up?" to them, and I walked in. I had talked about before that when I came home from Denver that I started working with the teens at my old church and high school because I felt this strong connection to teens because I understood them. And I thought maybe God was leading me to working with teens. And because of that, I convinced myself that God wanted me to befriend these teens, that maybe he did, and I just handled the next 4 months of my life terribly. I don't know. But the point is, I quickly became friends with these teens, and I handled it terribly. Well, as I'm friends with these kids, more friends came along because they were telling all their friends that, hey, there's this guy at this apartment who's cool to hang out with. So they started bringing all their friends to meet me. All these kids, they were pretty much troubled. For the most part, they either had terrible home lives or their homes were fine. They just were acting like typical, out-of-control, rebellious, lost teens. I wanted to give these kids a safe environment, so I allowed them to hang out in my apartment whenever they felt like it. They could sit and watch movies, play video games, talk, whatever. The only stipulation was they were never allowed to do drugs in my apartment because most of them, believe me, were on drugs. Now, you must see the irony and how ridiculous that is. My rapidly descending into the abyss mind convinced me that I wasn't returning to a Denver lifestyle if there was no illegal drugs in my apartment. But subconsciously, come on, I knew that's what I was doing anyway because I was ingesting all these, insane amounts of OTC meds. And yeah, sure, I wasn't doing them to getting high, but that's what I was doing. Believe me, I was getting high. I told myself, no, you're doing this because that's how you're going to manage your mental health. Well, as I began meeting more and more of these kids, I began helping them. I also believed that God was telling me, all right, you need to start bringing these kids to church so that you can introduce them to Jesus. I did. And because I was bringing close to 10 teens on any given Sunday, I kind of became a celebrity at my church. Next part, I I tread lightly because there's a lot of shame and just embarrassment in this. I let all this popularity and attention I was getting from these people at church go right to my head. My ego and pride blew up. One of those kids nicknamed me Jesus because I was always walking around town in sandals talking to random teens. I didn't fight real hard to change this image. I kind of liked it. All the while, I'm doing more and more OTC meds pretty much every day at this point because these kids were wearing me down and stressing me out. I just pretty much remained in a stupor all the time. My mind is becoming more and more twisted and broken. I was 100% nearing a mental breakdown. That day, it came. It happened. The day of my reckoning, the day of my humiliation. I had so thoroughly disgraced God because I pretty much became a bit of a cult leader. People were calling me the Pied Piper of lost teens. I was out of control. I was irreverent, and I was absolutely blasphemous. It's just disgusting. Right here, this next part, I am choosing to edit out some of the details. I don't typically edit much out of my stories, but this is bad. There's plenty of people who know the whole story. It's too shameful and too embarrassing to elaborate on and to relive. The bottom line is I publicly ended up in handcuffs. Again, this is now the third time in my life I'm in handcuffs, and I end up in the mental hospital. The doctors assumed I'd snapped and that I belonged with the severely mentally damaged patients. Think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or Awakens or any one of those movies that show insane asylums. That's pretty much where I was. I worked really hard to convince them that no, my outburst was due mainly to overdosing on those OTC meds, that I was pretty much just somebody on PCP or bath salts, but it didn't matter. I had to spend at least one night in the mental ward. Thankfully, the next day, as I was sobering up and coming off the drugs, they agreed that, okay, yes, it was just the drugs. So they moved me into the rehab ward where I spent the next 2 days just to be sure that I was stable enough to be released and I wasn't a danger to myself or others. Obviously, my breakdown in actions, it spread through the church and to my family and friends. They were so disappointed in me. And rightfully so. I mean, I'd been clean and sober for the most part for about 10 years, and now I go completely crazy. It took me a long time to regain trust from a lot of people. All right, I am going to end it right here because I'm at a very serious crossroads in my life. When I came out of the mental hospital, which one of my good pastors picked me up and took me home, I had some big choices to make. I had to make some decisions. Would I truly, once and for all, get my life right with God and correctly deal with my mental health, no matter the cost? Or am I going to continue on making the same mistakes over and over and over again ad infinitum, ellipsis, dot, dot, dot? Here's the thing, as I've learned, and I'm trying really hard to make sure that I don't ever do this again. I learned that God, He will not share His glory with anybody. That's Isaiah 42:8. Look it up, Isaiah 42:8. I let my arrogance, it just completely went out of control. And the decisions I made, I'm still living with the fallout of some of those choices. And it's just embarrassing. That's why I haven't brought it up. But that's it. I'm wrapping this one up, as I've said. I encourage you. I encourage you to go to my website and to look and to get serious about your mental health. You may not go crazy like I did, end up in a mental hospital, embarrass a ton of people in your life. You just might destroy your marriage. You just might destroy your job. You might just destroy many other things. Please, my friends, you've heard me say this over and over again in these episodes. Get the help that you need. Don't play with this fire. It's going to burn you eventually. And even if it doesn't burn everybody around you, it'll burn you. So please, please stop. But more than that, there's a different kind of fire that I'm always trying to warn you against. And that's the fire of hell that awaits for all those who refuse to bow the knee to Jesus in this life. I know the H word. Hell isn't a swear word anymore unless you're actually talking about the literal hell. My friends, there is a real hell. And I love you enough to tell you this. This is not hateful. Hating you would not be telling you that there is a hell waiting for those who do not confess Jesus as Lord in their life and take his sacrifice that he did, that he accomplished on the cross for your sins. There is a literal hell waiting, and that hell will never end. So you can find information about that on my website as well. Please get at it. My friends, please. I've been pleading this with you for a long time. Don't mess around with your eternity. All right. Thank you. Come back. See what choice I finally make. Till then, keep pressing on.